Are we together at the moment?
Something
Well,
like together
Prem,
is.
you're all over the place. I have to say, you're on like 4 screens.
Well, we do have multiple computers here. We're trying this kind of lo-fi setup. We're trying a kind of multi-camera mode. And I guess, we're 2 minutes away from what they call in Germany the akademisches Viertel, the 15-minute pause or kind of buffer that you have at the beginning of anything. So I'll give it, I think it's time to start. We have a bunch of people here. We have lots of lovely people from everywhere. And it's amazing to see so many people that we know and love from different places. So, well, I mean, it's a crazy time. I don't even think I need to say that. I'm lucky that you're all here. We're also lucky that we all have internet and we've got Zoom meeting and we've got some degree of health. That is a lot, and we're very privileged for it. And I also want to say, I'm lucky to have pants right now. I mean, some of you may have had meetings with me this week, and in fact, I may not have been wearing any pants because there's no need to anymore. I mean, nowadays, you get to just let it all hang out. And I mean, well, I'm just kidding. No, I really do have pants most of the time. But actually, you have no idea if I'm telling the truth or not. I mean, when I was a kid, though, I used to go, my parents sent me to this summer camp. It was called Hindu Heritage Summer Camp. And it was, imagine this, it was like a sea of 300 small brown children who were all in the Poconos. And, we were led by a group of white folk wearing orange robes who called themselves Swami Vishnu and Swami Lakshmi and Swami Shiva. Sounds kind of like a cult, right? Yeah, it was basically a cult. My parents had no idea of that. Mom and Dad, I want to talk to you after this. I want to know why you thought it was a good idea to send us out there. But anyways, every night we'd have a puja ceremony. We would have, all of us would do a kind of religious Hindu ritual. And afterwards, we were supposed to hug 3 people. Now, I, as a small child, as a small chubby 8-year-old, I made it my personal duty to hug every single person in that 300-person camp. Nowadays, we have a name for that, a super spreader. So good thing I am no longer able to hug each of you individually in person because things would be going all to shit right now. And, who knows, maybe there are computer viruses, maybe I can send some COVID-19 in the form of a computer virus to you, but hopefully not. But seriously, basically, I love people. That's why we're doing this here. My name, Prem, means love in Sanskrit. And, I think this is a way to try to get some people together. To give you a little bit of a preview of what we're going to try out over the next, hour and 3/4, we have a bunch of guests. We have incredible guests from all over the world, from Hong Kong, LA, New York, Stockholm, Amsterdam, Berlin, Halle, probably a couple other places too that I'm not even thinking of. And we're going to have some chats with them. We're going to get to hear about their work. And, we'll get to spend some time together. And those of you who know me probably know that I'm not a major fan of hierarchy. I'm not a big fan of hierarchy, but the internet makes it a little more difficult sometimes. We had a nice little introduction round right just now, but some of you may have heard there are a lot of Zoom trolls these days, people who think it's fun to jump into a Zoom meeting and drop some porn or some dick pics or something into the chat. I'm not really sure why you would do that. I mean, nowadays you have even more time to do that alone. Why do you need to do that with other people? But, in the thinking about that, we're going to have to shut down some controls. Not everybody is going to be able to share their video. We might have to shut off audio sometimes just to kind of keep things moving. But I do want, I want to point out to you, think of this also as a kind of Zoom tutorial. How many of you have ever used Zoom before? Raise your hand. And I'm not being paid by them in any way. In fact, we have to pay them for this. That's bullshit, but it is the case. But okay, so there's a chat window down there. Many of you will see something that says chat. So see if you can click on the chat and open up the chat window. Let's everyone try to do that for a second. Okay, And what I want you to do is we did a quick round of kind of popcorn introductions where we passed around who was speaking, but let's just do a quick chat check-in. Just take like a second and think, close your eyes if you want. Think about how you feel. Think about a word that comes to mind and just type in the first word that comes to mind into the chat window. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're gonna start it out now. And we may have technical difficulties. That's the nature of trying things out for the first time, but hopefully we'll have some fun along the way. I'm gonna be using PDF, a publication which I think is officially now released as of today as a score, but it's like an annotated script. It's a way to give us some structure. So I'm gonna share my screen now. It may look like I'm taking over your screen. Oh, there's the event we're at right now. There's my account. Oh, okay, let's get rid of all this other junk. Get to the right place in the PDF. That would be a good thing. Can you all see my screen? Does it look like I've monstrously taken over your computer just now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. That's the point. You know, we're kind of mixing between a mix of authoritative and non-authoritative modes. You know, figuring out the tech as we go, plugging things in. Okay. So let's see. Oh, we got somebody sending us some annotations. That's very cute. That's a little trick. I didn't even expect that would happen yet. All right, got some hearts. Thank you, everyone. So wait, what am I doing here? I am kind of fucking things up. That's okay. That's the way this goes. Let's see if I can go back. Okay, so here. There we are. Okay. So before we begin, let's take a moment to focus our bodies and minds. In preparation for giving a talk, teaching a class, or speaking in public, I have a ritual to calm and focus myself. Usually, I invite the other participants and audience to join in. It's a way for us to all start in a similar mental and physical state, to share both space and time together. So I'd like to ask you to join me. Wherever you are, stand up, stretch out your bodies, spread your legs, your arms into the air. Feel the tips of your fingers all the way down to your toes. We're going to count out loud together, slowly, all the way up to 60. Counting in sequence is one of the simplest structures. While you're counting, I ask that you listen not only to your own voice, but also the voices around you. Julia, could you unmute everyone? Okay. Does that sound okay? Now you can close your eyes. Let's start. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60. Okay, feel free to open your eyes slowly. Now that we're all in a similar frame of mind and body, let's get started. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great.
Should we all mute?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Okay. So now, let's see. Emily, yes. There's feedback. I think that one of these mics is on. Maybe even your phone. So let's start. I begin writing this in a flurry. 7:14 GMT +1 on 28 January 2020. Literally, the snow accumulating outside my window, close beside my bed. But also the urge to rid myself of an idea that's been lodged within me for far too long, to let loose thoughts precipitate into something more material. I'm reminded of the Queen of England's annual Christmas message a month earlier. In it, she dubbed 2019, quote, quite bumpy, likely referring to Britain's tumultuous year. But her term seemed applicable more broadly. 2019 wasn't just a bumpy year for politics in Britain, it was a bumpy year for the world. And 2020 is looking even bumpier. From certain vantage points, the preceding decades seemed smooth in comparison. The global myth of neoliberal progress was undergirded by certain unshakable faiths. Economies grow, democracy expands, information flows. This political and economic belief system accompanied a continuous transformation
to the physical, digital, and social interfaces of contemporary life. Even in the 20 years since I started working, these touch points have become faster, easier, more comfortable, ever more invisible. The frictionless glide of today's urbanized life lulls people into a sense of complacency and a desire for more, more, more. Powered by algorithms out of sight and mind, this system is optimized to bypass critical faculties in order to access the human desire for regularity and safety. The great irony is that it has made the world measurably less safe. With this smooth acceleration comes clear side effects. Extractive capitalism has led to climate catastrophe, threatening to destroy our shared world, while catalyzing problems such as increasing inequality, migration, violence, and the rise of nativist politics. In this contemporary context, a little bumpiness, the productive friction that slows things down and forces a moment of reflection, might prove a necessary, if discomforting, corrective.
Input. When I speak to myself. I ask myself, what would a person do if they could always act exactly how they want to be seen? What would drive someone to create a specific language, model, workflow, and ultimately ethos? Something fundamental is lost when people stop talking about their form and starting talking about content. What is being shown to whom, when, and why?
The role of the arts and culture is to reflect upon contemporary life and offer speculative paths for acting differently. This may start in the realm of aesthetics, but is ultimately about politics and ethics. Early 20th century avant-garde movements attempted this through a wholesale rejection of what came before them. These once revolutionary models overturned their predecessors to become the new, dominant, even oppressive ones. I believe we're past the era where it's possible to radically transform art and society from a position on a supposed outside. Every disruption is a power move. Instead, we must look for strategies that work from within, that create change iteratively and relationally using different types of tools. Bumpiness is a term I've been using, shaping, molding, modeling over the past 4 odd years. It started small, a word I once blurted out in an informal talk to students, and is now growing weighty, the subject of this presentation, with multiple avatars as a performance, an exhibition, and an essay. Perhaps, like all natural lives in this world, it will have its own inverted arc, growing smaller and smaller again, eventually disappearing with a poof once its proper time on Earth has passed. My objective in sharing this framework is to outline an aesthetic approach that privileges productive friction and positive discomfort over conformity and ease. It comprises a collection of bumpy things that inform my thinking. They come from different time periods and contexts of cultural production without being exhaustive. Instead, they're suggestive of potential groupings as yet to come, by me or perhaps by others. Bumpiness is an intentionally squishy word. It evokes material textures and uneven surfaces, rough, uncertain, unexpected things. I quite like its lumpiness, its multiple scales, its evasion of clear definitions, and the feeling in your mouth when you say the word out loud. Bumpiness. So instead of defining it outright, let's start with positioning the term along a spectrum from smooth to jagged. With bumpiness sandwiched right in the middle. As I've touched upon before, smoothness is the contemporary tendency for systems, formats of presentation, and things to appear as natural, neutral, or objective. Smooth things provide the comfort of familiarity that keeps you from thinking twice. Think of the endless scroll of social media or the one-click buy now button, uniformly formatted art fairs, biennials, and art exhibitions, pitch-perfect online talks. Even further, filtering algorithms to help tell you what you want, self-driving cars, and other invisibly automated encounters. Smoothness suggests easy consensus, the false notion that everyone ought to agree. At the other end of this spectrum is what I dub jaggedness. Jagged things self-consciously and visibly do not conform. They're calculated to provoke a reaction. I'm reminded of art movements like Dada or Situationism, of the aesthetics of early punk rock, which were intended to offend social norms on multiple levels. This stance has transformed itself into the contemporary mantra of, quote, disruption, permeating tech and cultural discussions. Jaggedness can manifest as the willful desire to contradict others for the sheer sake of opposition, novelty, or attention, rather than out of a desire to be known or to understand. Bumpiness represents something in between. It straddles this spectrum of smoothness to jaggedness, embracing some of the best qualities of each. It sympathizes with the seductive appeal of smoothness, while embedded in the calculated resistance of jaggedness. It's slick enough to be sexy, yet rough to the touch. It makes you wonder how something was made, why, and for whom. It invites you to go deeper. Bumpiness suggests that there's pleasure within the irregular, in what's not already expected and familiar. It may also be contentious. Bumpiness can challenge and raise difficult questions when two surfaces rub up in an attempt at mutual comprehension, quite literally the grasping of an idea together. During my studies in the 1990s, we were introduced to earlier related models for aesthetic strategies of disjunction. One example is Bertolt Brecht's idea of Verfremdung, the dramatic estrangement or alienation that shatters the fourth wall between audience and stage in order to unmask social, political, and ideological structures. This approach also felt linked to the intellectual self-reflexivity of institutional critique in contemporary art. Yet in contrast to Brecht, bumpiness feels less overtly antagonistic, less demonstrative, less rhetorical. It's more subtle, more connected to the texture of the thing and how it feels to encounter it. It could be compared more productively with scholar Sarah Ahmed's understanding of the value of discomfort and unseatedness in her essay, The Phenomenology of Whiteness. Reflecting on the experience of inhabiting a body of color within a context that takes whiteness as the norm, she points to the fact that comfort is only a baseline condition for specific kinds of people with specific privileges. Yet, in denaturalizing comfort as a universal concept, she also allows for the emancipatory potential of its opposite. Discomfort, in other words, allows things to move by bringing what is in the background, what gets overlooked as furniture, back to life. Every experience I have had of pleasure and excitement about a world opening up has begun with such ordinary feelings of discomfort, of not quite fitting in a chair, of becoming unseated, of being left holding onto the ground. So let's take this leitmotif of discomfort as a positive principle while we look together at some things I might call bumpy. And I'll just point as a footnote here, if any of you, my favorite podcast, and I have to admit, I'm a real newbie to podcasts. I thank Emily Smith for having introduced me to the genre overall only mere months ago. But Krista Tippett's On Being podcast, and in particular, some of the episodes, like this episode with Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, a Buddhist Zen monk, is fantastic. And she has a long section talking about discomfort that I think is quite relevant here. So I'm hoping Julia, if she's on it, can copy that link into the chat window for anybody who wants to look at it later. Now, anyways, let's come back. Let's start with the primary typeface of this presentation, Minotaur by Jean-Baptiste Levay of production type. Minotaur is constructed only from straight faceted cuts. Pronounced when enlarged, these surfaces nearly disappear at smaller sizes. This feature lends the reading experience, particularly on screen, a slight blurriness and awkwardness, which might make you look a little closer. The type designer Fred Smyers championed the functional value of irregularity for reading. Writing during the 1990s transition from analog to digital typography, he argues in his book Counterpunch, quote, most typefaces, certainly any belonging to the Garamond category, should have optical irregularity and variety if they are to function satisfactorily. This is not a shortcoming of the punch cutter or of punch cutting technique. Rather, it is a positive quality and one that has been lost. Whether the early punch cutters really understood this is, in the end, not open to us to know. What is interesting and relevant for us is the question of whether we can bring, quote, imperfection back under present conditions of design and production. So he maintains that slight imperfections keep the human eye from becoming bored. In this view, irregularity helps improve legibility and the understanding of complex ideas. Could this principle scale up to shape how we present and communicate new concepts more generally?
Input. When I speak to myself, I'm reflecting on the past weeks, months, or seasons. The seasons themselves are what really count.
Let's take the simplest kind of artwork, a drawing. Next to writing on a slip of paper or in a notebook, it's the mode of human expression that seems most natural. Perhaps because of this, drawings are often regarded as innocuous, modest objects. But in some cases, they can grow, like wild things, to an unexpected and even potentially threatening scale. Marlene McCarty's recent work focuses on toxic plants, poisonous species that have been used by women since millennia to take control of their own reproduction, meticulously rendered at uber-human scale and installed on exposed stud walls alongside the actual poisonous plants. The drawings are lush, yet ripe with subversive meanings.
Excuse me, Prem. I heard. Are we okay?
Yeah. Wait,
Okay.
who's that?
Excuse me, but I heard what you were saying. You know nothing about my work. You mean my whole fallacy is wrong. Look at the master. Discourse pumps through his veins, and its rhetorical posture brings color to his cheeks. To destroy the discursive mechanism is not a simple undertaking. According to Our Lady of French post-structuralism, the blatant bind framing all speech is a mechanism of patriarchal power. How you ever got to teach a course in anything is totally ein Wunder.
Well, Marlene, that's a very good point. You're right. I'm not really a professor. I'm actually kind of like a failed academic.
Okay, well, that explains it then. To quote Prem, let's take the simplest kind of artwork, a drawing. Next to writing on a slip of paper or in a notebook, it's the mode of human expression that appears most natural. So there it is, that word, natural, the innate or essential qualities of a person or animal. The argument that particular things are as they are because they are natural has led to centuries of oppression, misconceptions, and control, and possibly the centuries-long notion of drawing as a secondary art form. Ordinary, low, weak, the stepsister of art history, not the master's choice. I consciously choose drawing due to such misconceptions, not because it is easy and natural. Drawing is the world of ideas, the intellect. I borrow from a vernacular language of drawing, not because it comes naturally to me, but because of what it means, what it signifies. This is not a personally developed marking style or system bent on advertising my mastery. Outside the drawing frame, titles also function as elements commensurate to the protuberances, hirsutism, mutagenic growth, anthropomorphism, and wonderment co-mingling into larger than life graphite and ballpoint pen compositions. We are in a moment of upheaval, grappling with obsolescence. Years of colonization, capitalism, and industrialization have brought us where? To the land of waste? To sites of toxicity? To the compost pile? To the trash heap of white Western civilization? What kind of new growths and infections happen in this steaming pit of falling aparts and coming togethers? Thank you for that image, Donna Haraway. Ideas merge, unruly weeds twine, inducing release, relief, liberation, and new growth. Drawings accrue, and gardens of powerful plants, both indoor and out, are being built as sites of coming together, places of merging, empowering us with knowledge and protection while serving as monuments to deep pasts and near futures. Speaking of bumpiness. And then, Prem, you went on to say, hang on, Marlene McCarty's recent work focuses on toxic plants, poisonous species that have been used by women since millennia to take control of their own reproduction. That is true, but slightly reductive. Even the designation poisonous or toxic, though definitely sensational, is prejudicial and limiting. The line between medicine and toxicity has always been thin. The plants have long histories of harm and help to all sexes. Captured in myths, magic, ritual, medicine, and folklore. Many powerful plants are hallucinogenic and can cause impotency, induce abortion, heal diseases, or kill. The plants come with a symbolic duality. They kill to give life. In the Middle Ages, witches or wise women healers represented a political, religious, and sexual threat to both the Protestant and Catholic churches. The medieval church, supported by kings, princes, and secular authorities, controlled medical education and practice. The witch hunts, wherein up to 60,000 Europeans were burned at the stake between the 15th and 18th centuries, constituted a professional repudiation of the skills and rights of the non-professional to minister to the poor. Then, as today, control of medicine determined who would live and who would die. And on that note, I just need to call out the new Republican rallying cry, die for the Tao. Medicinal use of plants even goes beyond humanity. Scientists are comparing the ways both gorillas and humans use plants. African traditional healers have been using indigenous plants for centuries to treat ailments. Researchers are discovering that gorillas include many of these same plants in their diet. At the Virunga Park in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, 110 medicinal plants are found in the park. 55 are known to be consumed by gorillas. And there, going beyond humanity, I end.
Well, thank you, Marlene. I have to say, I feel pretty schooled. I'm
a professor.
Well, you are an actual professor. I'm a fake professor. So the good news about this whole PDF thing is that, you know, I can rewrite it. So maybe we can talk and you can give me some tips and I can rewrite that text so that it's a little bit better and makes a little more sense. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Prem. Thank you for trusting me to just say what I want.
Well, you know what? You know, when you've got a name like Marlene McCarty, you can do whatever the hell you want. So thank you. So, well, I'm gonna continue for a moment. I'm gonna take over your screen again, share screen, if that's, I'm gonna quickly move past this and move on to just talk about books. Now, books can carry the most radical ideas in the world, but they still sometimes show up in these very normal packages. I mean, and sometimes it's not just about the books themselves, but to make books that are unusual may require unorthodox ways of producing things. For example, bringing together artists, designers, and writers in a way that's not only collaborative, but also conflictual, or moving ideas from one medium to another. Let me read something.
I'm moving to the TV room now. I'm done with my part.
Oh, okay.
So you can.
Hey, wait, Marlene, you're still on.
Oh, sorry.
But good that Marlene is moving to the TV room. Any of you all makes sense because here we're going to read the introduction to Ways of Seeing. So this book has been made by 5 of us. Our starting point was some of the ideas contained in the television series Ways of Seeing. We have tried to extend and elaborate these ideas. They have influenced not only what we say, but also how we have set about trying to say it. The form of the book is as much to do with our purpose as the arguments contained within it. No, don't want your help. Thankfully, well, I shouldn't say thankfully. I guess nobody's going to contradict me on this one for various reasons. But Ways of Seeing is a critical revisionist art history book with a political approach. It stands out on a bookshelf through its bold design and atypical writing style. This is the result of its collective production, which allowed for the careful interweaving of text and images. Its argument is embedded within every page of the layout. And here I'll also point, I've taught a lot of classes from Ways of Seeing. Again, I'm a fake professor, but Julia is going to copy in, if anybody's interested, some of the assignments and approaches that have come out of this into the chat window. A work's structure, its organization and design, is as much part of its communication as its manifest narrative content. They are inseparable. Some things call attention to this frame of presentation rather than pretending it's invisible. Baseera Khan's archival collages challenge the thinness of the digital image through an activated approach to three-dimensional display. She transforms materials ranging from documentation of private performances, historical and social texts, and found objects into multi-layered constructions, all housed within a sculptural frame that complicates a quick read. So, Baseera, are you here with us? Can you unmute yourself? How are you
Hi.
doing?
I'm good.
Thanks for joining us. I know you're not feeling great.
It's okay.
Well, where are you now? You're in Brooklyn?
I am in Crown Heights and I'm in my apartment, which is also my studio. Yeah, I had this kind of crazy last 2 years, and so I was traveling a lot to teach. I was in Virginia, or I was at Bennington. And so the idea of having to travel to go to a studio when I was in town just felt it felt bad to do that. And so I just tried to minimize everything into my apartment. So I'm kind of glad I did that now, because I'm isolating in my workspace and my home space. So it's working out so far.
Yeah, it seems oddly prescient to have done that beforehand.
Yeah. I mean, I also got a plant. Let me show you my plant.
Love to see your plant. Whoa, now that is a plant. That's a real plant.
I know, it's like
It's like bigger than a person.
It's taller than me. Yeah.
Whoa.
So the other thing I did was I put all of my artwork up around, and you know, I'm just kind of like going through archives. I made some new collages, just trying to figure out what I have. And let's see, for a minute I had like a whole calendar of all the different institutional shows that I was going to have, but then, you know, clearly everything's been either canceled or we're working on a different date for like 2021.
I mean, that must be tough also as an artist, to have all of these things that you're working towards and then suddenly they're postponed or changed, or, I mean, how are you dealing with that?
Well, I think there was a little bit of denial, there was grief, there was anger, and now I'm kind of just like mostly grateful that I don't have a really bad case of COVID. Because I'm going to be able to kick this. This is my like 4th day. And, you know, the frustrating thing about being sick is that I am not officially a patient of COVID. But there is like some new tests that are coming out that I maybe would be able to like get tested after the fact, just to make sure that I have antibodies. And if I do have antibodies, I can then donate my plasma.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that. That's really good to know. So it is something
Yeah.
that you can do if you've had the virus.
Yeah. Yeah. They tested 2 strains of what I guess doctors called SARS, but I guess it's COVID. They tested yesterday. So they're working on a vaccine, but who knows how long it's going to take.
Yeah. I mean,
so it's interesting what you said about my work.
Does it make any sense, or am I totally off?
No, it makes sense. I do a lot of layers, so I can show you like my setup.
That'd be great.
Let's see. I have all of my assets, which I call assets here. So I work with a lot of different pieces of plexi, and I laser cut a lot of shapes So I keep all the extra stuff here. And then I have all my prints, pieces of prints. And these are, I don't know how many of you saw my snakeskin show at Simone's Ball, but these are the actual artifacts of mosaic, which a lot of the collages from that show came from.
Hey, wait, can you slow down a little bit? The video's a little choppy for me.
Of course. So this is an example of, I make my own spacers for my collages that I frame. And
do you come from a background, did you study sculpture or painting, or what did you originally study in terms of art?
When I was in undergraduate school, I studied sociology, drawing, and painting. And then when I finally went to grad school at Cornell University, it was an architecture, city planning, and art school. So by that point, I was kind of being heavily influenced by planning and architecture, but I was at that point focusing on sculpture and performance. So the school that I went to, you know, it's not a school that, it's not like a traditional school where you learn how to be an artist. And it's like, there's certain schools where you kind of learn how to be an artist. It was just like a really awesome school, heavy theory based. I don't think I even really spent much time in the art building. I spent most of my time in Africana studies and the government department. But I made like really large scale sculptures. I did some performances, and oh, this is one of them. Like large scale. So this is like, I made this frame from scratch. So even when I was in grad school, I was already thinking about how the frame itself could be a part of something that I make that is significant to me, instead of just thinking about it as a neutral space. And
yeah,
these are, go ahead.
No, you go, sorry.
These are like slivers from the collage. So these are actually, well, this is a test, but these are actually cut from the big column that was at the show at Simone's Ball.
Well, that is what really kind of struck me the first time I encountered your work, and as I've seen it more and more, is just how there's this conception of the whole, the idea of rather than just treating things as discrete objects, you're thinking about situations, you're thinking about the context, you're thinking about how somebody experiences them, you're thinking about your cat. Hi. And it's, you know, what keeps bringing me back to your work. So thank you so much. I hope, can we all, everybody in this audience, kind of like give a hope for Baseera to feel better by tomorrow?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us in your sickish state. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna take over people's screen again. Let's do this one more time. This will become a rhythm. So today, as the picture plane becomes ever flatter, the depth of the pixel able to be shared and circulated rapidly, thickening a surface so that it clogs channels of dispersion, carries an embedded politics. The strategy of calling attention to presentation strategies is a recurring theme across this presentation. Try saying that 10 times fast. Graphic design has been lionized as a neutral container for ideas, an impartial and abstract medium. Although emerging out of a modernist lineage, Karel Martens' work explodes its very conventions. His signature approach emphasizes roughness, materiality, typographic bluntness, and visual complexity. This philosophy, apparent even in the design of his own monograph, lends Martens's commissioned and independent projects an unfinished and yet generous quality. Now, I'm going to drop out of the screen share for a moment. Karel, are you there? Can you unmute yourself?
I'm Prem.
Hi. We decided not to play, so just as a note, we were going to play a film of Karel's called Not for Resale. It's from the late 1990s. Unfortunately, the audio didn't work so well over Zoom, so Julia is going to copy a link to view it into the chat window, and anybody who wants to watch it can see it afterwards. So let me bring Karel Martens. Instead, Karel, maybe we can chat for a couple of minutes and talk about your work.
That's fine.
So, well, you know, since this seems to be a ritual, what do you think about what I said of your work? Does that make any sense, or do you disagree about it? Also, this idea of bumpiness, does that make any sense to you at all? You've been doing this for a lot longer.
It feels flattering, so it's a kind of, yeah. It's not. You said it's a philosophy, so I don't. Yeah, I don't see it as a philosophy. So it's a kind of more a strategy to survive.
Can you say more about that? How do you mean, like like you mean your graphic design work and the way you approach it, or this roughness, this materiality?
No, in general, yeah. So let's say graphic design, the danger from graphic design is that it gets in a kind of automatism. So kind of, and then that you all, yeah, when you are making books or other kind of things, then the danger is that the automatical, and it's hard to escape from that automatism, I believe. So it's always, for me, to find another way. Let's say, to do differently. And then I'm wondering afterwards that it looks so the same, so that it's hard to escape for yourself, of course. But yeah, philosophy is for me something else, so kind of. But it's very flattering when you, for me, philosophy, of course, very intriguing and nice thing. But
how do you maintain? I mean, you've been doing this since the 1950s. So yeah. What, like 60, 70 years now, 60 years. So 70 years. Yeah, 70. So how do you maintain the idea of doing things differently day by day? I mean, isn't it making you very insecure to keep trying to change it?
It's not also not a strategy to change things all the time, but let's say it's a chain of working, so that you always have to how to say, learn from what you did and try to use that knowledge for the next step. Is that clear?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I mean, I just wonder how, I mean, I'm projecting onto you, but for me, there's always this question of, oh, am I doing enough? There's a kind of insecurity built into it. And I just wonder, how do you maintain the confidence to keep making work in a particular way over this long period?
No, just not so confident. So it is more. I also feel very, very often insecure. So it's a kind of it's more a struggle, but not. It's also. It's not an horrible thing, but it is also, in fact, a nice thing. So that you have to gain something instead of to repeat things, or to redo things in the same way. Yeah,
that's a nice way of thinking about it. It's almost like a process of learning, but you're learning as you're doing it and looking back, reflecting, and then moving forward.
Yeah.
So for you, I mean, what I just showed is actually the work that you've done, you know, in the past. What are you looking forward to? What are you thinking about now?
Let's say also, let's say my work is also influenced. I'm let's say my start was in the time from letterpress. So books are made by monotype machines and printed as letterpress. And after that, you get the offset technology. And in between, there was also a kind of, I did a lot of, for a publisher with IBM Composer. And that got, so it was a kind of, technique has also an influence on the expression of design. So everything was, let's say, it was a little bit clumsy, but also the expression makes it more visible what happens. And so as now, what you said already in the beginning, things get smooth, so it's kind of everything is possible. So with the computer, now it's the computer dominant, of course. Quark, I remember Quark Express was for me already hard to learn on the computer, and then later on, now it's my Macintosh computer. And I remember that the people who said to me, "Oh, that's for your life." So when I bought my first computer, but in between I have, let's say, this. I believe that's the 10th of the 11th machine I'm talking to now at this moment. And let's say when it's also visible in the results, the design results. So that in the past you have to instruct the executor how to do it. And that's sometimes undonable for the guy to execute it in a way. But now everyone is done on that machine. You can do it yourself. You see it also in the design that layering, everything is possible. So it's a kind of, so it is harder. And I have the feeling that restriction is a very important part of developing things. So not only in design, but how many ingredients do you need to make something clear? And so for me, it's more holding back than getting over. But the computer forces you a little bit to get over. It's also in ways of typography. In the past, I remember was a book designer in the Netherlands, and he was besides the typesetter with cigarette paper to make the space between the capitals. Now, let's say there's not one designer in the world who takes care for spacing of type. But in that time, that was an holy thing, so that the kind of, that you got an eye for the distance between the letters, and everything was done by hand. But now it's also an automatical thing on the machine, so everyone can, for example, centering type is a very easy thing to do. It makes, in general, a nice result. It's a nice result, but it's also kind of laziness. So it's kind of everything. Oh, the button, and then it's okay. So it's a fine. So it gets difficult, more difficult, while the machine is more advanced. But to restrict yourself to kind of a set of ways of thinking, of set of materiality, or and so on and so on and so on. But for me, it's always the question: how much do you need? So it's a little bit. It's not less, it's more, but it is how much do you need? That's
Thank you.
And also, let's say, I also the feeling that graphic design at the moment is a meta language for designers. So it's not for me, it's the public an important part in the game. So I always have in mind that it is for someone. So that it is not only for me, but also for someone that he can read, and when he cannot read it, then it has a meaning that it's not need to be readable, or So it's more a communicative thing in a real way. So that's the nice thing from the magazine Oasis. So I see it also in communication with the contributors, so that we get every 2 months another issue. So it's not while I came original from the side that everything was uniform. So let's say in the 60s, 70s, everything is grid related, and there is one underlying grid, and that was the result. But now I believe it's much more human to show. Yeah, you can see it as preparing a meal. So for the contributors. So that's that makes for me design much more interesting. So so that it is really when you are, say, you're a chess player, then it is also nicer to make a difficult game than have an easy game. And I see I see a lot of design.
I was going to say that.
Excuse me. Yeah?
Oh no, I was going to say that's a good statement too. The idea that rather there is something in a difficult game that has value, and also what you said before about constraints, having restrictions as a designer actually being a thing that helps to push you forward. So Karel, I'm going to move on because we want to keep going, but is that okay? Do you want to finish up with anything, or?
No, it's not okay. So I'm not.
You're not done.
It's fine. No, I like. I thank you for the invitation. I like also it's also a new thing in a way for me. So it's a kind of to communicate in this way. Yeah, we are also isolated here in Amsterdam, and while I see the river, so I'm not complaining, but it is hard times, and now to communicate in this way, it's. Yeah, I believe that this system is the first time that I'm using it, so it's a kind of intriguing. But
yeah, I mean that
makes it possible that I can knowledge from all, now from 2 people already, and it's really nice to see. So I'm happy.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Part of the how do you say, the crowd. Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you, Karel. Thank you for coming, and we'll continue then. But it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to continue. Now, I'm going to put on my faux professorial voice. Functionalist approaches to design have been widely critiqued, but they still suffuse today's understanding of the field. In Are We Human? Notes on an Archaeology of Design, historians and scholars Beatrice Colomina and Mark Wigley succinctly challenge these assumptions, reframing the discipline and its expanded potential. Designers are always understood as solving a problem. Artists, intellectuals, and writers are expected to ask questions, to make us hesitate, to see our world and ourselves differently for a moment, and therefore to think. Why not design as a way of asking questions? Such historical shifts within a discipline's self-understanding are often triggered by changes in the tools of production and distribution. Karel already just suggested some of these things in the ways he's experienced technology. As typesetting and image composition became more widely accessible in the 1980s, it allowed design practitioners the latitude to move from commercial communications into more personal ones. April Greiman's canonical 1986 poster, Does It Make Sense?, is a manifesto for the role of the personal in the era of early computer design. Although highly individual, her focus on the tools of production, as well as transparency about her own working methods, represents a self-reflexive and even pedagogical gesture. And some of you, if you can read that, it says that's a thumbnail of the entire image of this 6-foot-long poster that April Griman made. And it says, this image contains 289,322 bytes of information, which is less than the average email these days. So with those restrictions, April Griman made this incredible piece. As new technologies transform our bodies and senses, how are they changing our models of community? How might art, design, curating, and other creative pursuits define themselves collectively in the future?
Input. When I speak to myself, or read into something else, such as when I'm reviewing a design or curating a show, I often override the help needed to actually design a work of fiction or visualize the future. K. was able to tell such intimately personal stories about the making of K, that I entwined the two completely. This led to some wild and wacky results. I cannot stress this enough. Listen to the music, but also the words.
Within the history of art and design, there's a fluid exchange between commissioned and independent work. Most practitioners, regardless of their primary medium, have spanned this spectrum. When confronted with a particular context, for example, a talk, an exhibition, a publication, or a canvas, any creative producer must decide, whether consciously or instinctually, how to approach the situation's unique constraints. Sometimes reimagining a brief can even lead to unexpected, wild and wacky results. Now, what I'm showing here is some screen grabs from a piece by the Rodina based in Amsterdam. So given our timing, I'm going to ask Julia to copy in a Vimeo link to their video while we bring them on to discuss with us. So the Rodina, are you there, Vit and Tereza?
Yes, hello, hi. Here.
Hi.
Here we are.
Hi, hello to Amsterdam. Can you still, well, I'll just read this text for a moment and then bring you on and we can chat for a little bit.
Okay, great.
So the Rodina's identity system for a contemporary art exhibition is embedded as sculpture within a custom video game. Playful and performative, this interactive project collapses the divide between communication and participation, creating its own virtual world for many to experience. Okay. Where are you, Tereza? There you are.
Amsterdam.
Let's bring
Here
you
in Amsterdam. I'm here.
I know. Some more Amsterdam.
Yeah. Hello, everybody.
Well, so hi. Well, thank you for joining us today. I mean, it's exciting. I just realized it's been just over a year since I met you all, since I met you in Amsterdam in your studio, and was blown away by the way in which you think about design, taking it not as a set of constraints, but rather as a playing field, a way to take a commercial design project and turn it into the opportunity to do something performative, to make a video game out of an identity system. I mean, how did you start to think about this idea of performance as being part of design?
Yeah, we experimented a lot and we've been thinking how to contribute to the world we are in. So how to responsibly contribute to what we're seeing and what's happening around us. And I started performing. It's one big experiment to connect performance, performativity with design and communication and put it together. But we are working on it. Yeah. Are you going to play the Playber game?
Well, what I'm going to do is let me play like a quick minute of it, okay? And we'll see if hopefully the audio is working. Let's try it right now. Give me a thumbs up, Tereza, if the audio is working.
Okay, I will mute myself.
Okay, I think the video was probably a little choppy for folks, the audio too. But again, Julia is going to copy into the chat window a link to that so that you can see it. Well, I mean, I think the idea of taking a kind of commission and then transforming it into the opportunity to create its own world is a kind of fascinating approach to what could otherwise just be a straightforward, quote, communication project.
Yeah, somehow I thought about this video specifically. Do you hear me, guys? Yeah? Okay, so I thought about this video game specifically because I thought somehow this was first time when we, instead of performing with physical bodies, we wanted to perform with the virtual one, or give possibility to other people to be part of the world we're designing. And somehow, also through this crisis, specifically through what's happening these days, I somehow realized a thing, that artists and designers, we are the ones who are able to make the personal public, to kind of transfer the inner part to others, to give it to others, be it this experience that it's part of the virtual world of this game, right? So we can kind of channel our ideas, our dreams into something quite almost tangible, but of course in the virtual world. So here again, the labor it's not a happy, colorful, pleasurable topic. It's a painful topic. It talks about exploitation and hard work and labor of us designers, but also immaterial labor of all the workers who are being exploited. So that it's a game about hard work. And we recorded a lot of sounds here in the studio. Like behind me, you can see the coffee machine that you can hear in the game. It's the bumping of the coffee machine running, because coffee is the fuel we are running on as designers, as part of creative industry. So we wanted to show that. And for me, I somehow tried to share the suffering or the uncertainty and the feelings and doubts and pains with others through, or in this case, through this game world, through this virtual world, rendered on, like behind me, on really powerful PC. It's rendered out there just behind me. It's like really powerful, 2 big machines that can render a big 3D games. And we design everything on this big 5K screen, so we see every detail of the world, which is really crazy. But you can say, why, Tereza, like, why are you designing game? Why are you not then contributing to the world outside? Right? Because it seems so.
Great question. Thanks. No?
So why? Do you have answer?
I don't know the answer. That's your answer. I mean, I guess I have my theory, but.
Yeah, because I was thinking, people often say that like younger generation who play games or design games are on Twitch and all these like gamers media. that they are escaping reality. But no, we are not escaping. We are imagining better worlds. But if it's impossible really outside, then we are imagining and contributing to the real world by designing virtual worlds. Does make sense?
Well, no, I think it's an interesting idea. It's that to make the world you want to see, you have to model it somehow.
You have to reimagine what you have and use it. That's what we're trying. It's exercise in imagination, and it's we can also share our critique and paint through those worlds. So it's one big interconnected, the virtual world and the real world outside. And especially these days when a lot of kids are closed in their homes, people are back with gaming and with games.
I mean, I see this from having teenage stepchildren, that the question of how to make games actually something that are their own world, but how do they reflect other things happening in the world is super important. So thank you so much, Tereza, and thanks for being with us here today. Okay, so some art schools function as, I mean, the question of learning that came up with games just now is actually really important. How do we learn things? So some art schools function as ivory factories, teaching artists to believe that they exist outside of real world's constraints. But every world is limited by structures and edges. Even a curatorial invitation functions as a brief. I often ask myself, how does a work exceed its context, perform well outside of its ostensible purpose? How might a thing extend beyond the boundaries of a given identity, discipline, or genre to incorporate multiple, even contradictory approaches? Esteban Cabeza de Baca's paintings juxtapose conflicting modes of mark making, from the digitally inspired and pixelated to more representational forms, into a single canvas. By refusing to adhere to a given category of painting, they suggest less arbitrarily delimited modes of creation. And here I want to invite Esteban to join us, to unmute yourself and come to the fore.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
Wow, what the hell is going on, Esteban? I love that.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm just excited to see all you guys on this platform. And I wanted to also give a shout out to Marlene McCarty, who is my drawing painting teacher back at Cooper Union. So I feel like today, when I'm presenting my stuff today, I'll be probably using some of the things you taught me. But I think it was interesting what you're saying about not only I feel like there's a conversation around like contagion and bacteria, but then also the institutions that hold like these contagions or whatever. So like for me, my art, and you can kind of see it over my face right now. This is like one of the paintings that I was going to show with Prem. Kind of came about my research of looking back at my family's ancestry, where one of my ancestors, Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, in like 1527 came to like the New World as like a conqueror for Spain, part of like the Panfilo de Narvaez expedition. But then they were shipwrecked and off the coast of Florida, and then discovered by Capoque, Han, and Caracawa Indians. And as a result of like the contact of Europeans and indigenous Americans, there was like the invasion on a micro level of smallpox and different contagions from the old world into the new. So a lot of my work of not only thinking about the collision of colonization and the different worldviews of like witchcraft from the old world and maybe more animism and egalitarian forms of self-governance intertwined with ecologies of the new world, is thinking about how I could also think about what my ancestor did to eventually gain his freedom of if he was a slave for Native Americans for a long time, maybe they also realized if these Europeans brought the contagion, maybe they also had the cure. So they used all of our Nunez and faith healing rituals to help cure some of their people from the sickness. So after like 8 years of captivity, he like gained his freedom, and then was like the first like European to have contact with indigenous people and like having relationships. And I think that would be a good way to think about what we're doing here now too, is like advocating for not only what he did for indigenous rights before it was fashionable, to now think about how we could advocate for spaces like this of building grand alliances on a digital platform as well too.
Thank you, Esteban. I wanted to ask you also briefly about teaching, because this is something that came up in some of our conversations here, how you think about the kind of transference of ideas and how they change in their contexts through teaching and pedagogy.
Yeah, I actually started a drawing right now, sort of. I wanted to do like a weird loop thing, but for me, the way that I could also share in my background images of my students' work right now too. Because I think right now, you know, a lot of students are really disenchanted, but then I think they also, after like the first week of Zoom teaching, they really want to have contact with people as well too. So I think one of the ways that I've just been trying to take it easy on my students, but keep them healthy, engaged, and distracted in a good way, has been just giving them either firsthand journalistic assignments, or like I'm gonna put this in my background, or like giving them just freedom to just draw on their cell phones and stuff like that. So my background is like an image from one of my students. He's also working, not only trying to graduate from school, but he's also working in grocery stores as like a frontline, like, you know, resource, whatever you want to call it, and just documenting what he's seeing. So for me, I've been just trying to like instill in my students, you know, a lot of them are trying to figure out how they can keep going, and I just try and encourage them to not only make art, but re-envision what's going to happen after this, and hopefully thinking about contagions, but also evolving as an artist in a good way.
Well, thank you so much, Esteban. It's great to see you, and also to hear about what you're doing educationally and how you can think about them working with the platforms of the moment in different and kind of expansive ways. Thank you so much. Okay, so now, speaking of studying, when I studied art in the 1990s, you know, media were much more strictly separated, and beauty was a term for suspicion. To claim it as a transcendent quality was seen as weak or somehow lacking. And so, I mean, especially in this era where images are flicking past us faster than ever, they might get some likes along the way, aesthetic beauty could serve another purpose. I think that maybe aesthetic beauty can function in certain cases as a Trojan horse, a way to introduce people to unfamiliar and urgent material. And here I want to point to the work of Connie Samaras, who is a trooper and has joined us from Los Angeles, where it is extremely early. And you know, Connie's work, I've known Connie for a number of years, and her approach to photography, which both takes the kind of beauty of photography uses that as a way to talk about other ideas, to introduce into these photographs alien narrative content. In the case of the series of work that I just showed, the manuscripts of Octavia Butler, the visionary science fiction author. And so I wanted to ask Connie if she can come join us for a second to talk about her work and her thinking around Octavia Butler.
Hi, Prem. Can you hear me?
Hi. Where are you?
I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Can we spotlight Connie so she comes to the fore? Where is...
I'm here.
Julia, there you are. Hi. Good morning.
Good morning, Prem. Can you hear me? I
Great.
unmuted. You can hear me, right? Yes?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Thank you for inviting me. It's been so interesting hearing everybody. Oh, I have to fix my hair though. But it's been really great. So, yeah, so we're going to do this talk show thing, you said.
We're trying it. We're trying it
and
right
you asked
now.
me to shoot my garden, but there's been so much talked about. I was just thinking maybe we should talk a bit more about Butler if people they're not familiar with Octavia Butler's work. But,
I mean, I wasn't familiar. This is the thing. I mean, I had heard of Octavia Butler, but I'd never read her. And then it was really your work.
Octavia
And
Butler.
yeah, I mean, it was your work that introduced me to her and to her archives. And so I just hope that maybe we could talk for a moment about her work and, you've been thinking about it for decades. So.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I wanted to mention in terms of my own work for a long time, and I did shoot video in my garden to show, but there's not going to be the time. I was very interested. I mean, overall, for my work has been over the years. It's determined by the conceptual material, which is really deeply rooted in the social, political, and psychological geographies in the everyday moment. And I'm particularly interested in the ideas that you raised in your discussion, in your what you read. I like about what Ahmed was saying about discomfort, allowing things to move. And I know I've talked with you about and Snitow's work about the feminism of uncertainty, and Octavia Butler and her work, which is speculative fiction, and I'll just give you a quick description. Her main philosophical concerns in her novels are the abuse of power, the destruction of Earth's resources, and the different ways of being human. And Butler died about 13 years ago, but her work, particularly the Parable of the Sower series and Parable of the Talents, remains very prescient. And where Butler shares with Snitow's idea of uncertainty, because Anne was a feminist, she passed last fall, her activism employed this idea that there's always uncertainty, and what happens when you try to change things because you want to picture these other futures. And one of the driving forces in my work has been speculative and science fiction. As you try to imagine these other worlds, that's the key to change. But what happens is you can easily atrophy in these ideas, in people ignoring this idea, this state of uncertainty, or as Ahmed would say, discomfort. And this is the place where creativity begins, right? This is a constant source of creativity. And Butler was her ideas were a lot about change, that change is the constants, and that's the constant in Parable of the Sower. And what we're experiencing now, she was extreme. People haven't read these novels, and you and I talked about doing like a sort of global reading group of this and seeding people with
Totally
her
into
novels. Butler grew up in an African-American neighborhood in Pasadena called Altadena and North Pasadena. And she, against all odds, became a writer. And so there's a perspective, and I was thinking about your chart about this idea of bumpiness and jaggedness, and then the sort of flat line of comfort at the top. That's that's the goal of neoliberalist consumer economy. But I was thinking that more as like instead of like a chart, your chart is like it's a dynamic movement between the three constantly. So you need the jaggedness you call is actually not without is a necessity to wake up people, and people go, don't say that, don't call me that, don't call me out on that. But it's a necessity when people are muted and silent. I love your movement of the bumpiness, because it shows a kind of integration of the two. I don't know where I was going with that, but this dynamic force of it, and Butler in this. Well, I know what I was going to say. Butler, because she came from such. Because she came from poverty, and living in the firsthand experiencing the racism and poverty that she experienced, I think allowed her to have a kind of incredible vision in her work, and she's been influential on many, many, many new generations of writers of color and artists of color. But one of the things, she's prescient in many, many ways, and a great storyteller. And we're in the last 100 years, we went from a technology of physics, which determined space travel and the bomb, and we moved to IT technology. Butler in the 80s and 90s was already thinking in terms of biotech, which is now the current emphasis in technology now, increasingly, is biotech. And she really thought of the body as constantly changing and what it meant to be human. And the image I showed, so the image you just showed, that's in the exhibition, I shot at the Huntington Gardens in Pasadena, very close to where she grew up. And it's where she put her papers. And a number of us artists have been doing archival work on it, on her archive. And it's quite brilliant that she put her archive there. There was a number of libraries that wanted her work. But Pasadena is a very wealthy, white community that is where Caltech is, just down the street from it. And a lot of the scholars who do research there are mostly white, a lot of British scholars. And it's surrounded by these beautiful gardens that Huntington put there. And he was doing this kind of world building of the gardens are meant to represent every region in the world. And Butler was this incredible world builder. And so what I did is I took quotes out of, so I was going to say earlier about this being a very white bread space. There's now a number of artists, scholars of color in the library, which is kind of a great thing to see finally there. But anyway, so I took quotes from her manuscripts and I took them outside to the garden and printed them on Mylar and held them up over these gardens. And what appeared was I didn't prefigure the image. I allowed just this kind of chance to happen about what words would appear and what wouldn't. And in this particular one, there's a quote at the top that says, "Los Angeles was dying, much of the world was changing rapidly, involuntarily, blundering through a vast climate change." And at the top of the image where those words were, the words broke apart. It was written in red ink, and they broke apart and they became these red flowers in the trees. And I saw this as an incredible metaphor, unexpected happening, so to speak, in terms of Butler's work, because what she describes in Parable the Sower, and Contagion is very much part of these novels, is so dark and very difficult to read. And when you read her descriptions of the presidents in both of these novels in the United States, they fit Trump to a T.
Well, she was clearly, she was prescient in so many ways, and
Yeah.
her writings and her notebooks kind of show that. Well, I mean, speaking of being ahead of their times, I want to say to everyone, I'm sorry, we're running a little behind our times. We're the opposite of
Okay,
Octavia
sorry to
Butler
go on,
right
yeah.
now. No, I
Yeah.
mean, this is the problem of trying to fit, you know, so many great people into one thing. I hope you can stay. We're going to run a little bit over. I hope that all of the contributors and participants can also stay a little bit later. So, Connie, let's get that reading group going. I think there should definitely be a global reading and collective sci-fi writing workshop as per what you've been thinking about in different places. And I hope we can do that together soon. So thank you.
Thanks, Prem.
All right. So I'm going to continue. And, you know, we have been doing this for a long time. I hope that you're all you might be tired in front of your computers, but maybe I can ask you all to stand up for a moment. I can ask you to stand up and just kind of move your body. Because, you know, one of the things that art can do, of course, is to take you towards unfamiliar territories, even if you're tired. And so I want to move now to the work of an artist named Wong Kit Yi, who is based in Hong Kong, who for a number of years has been making these incredible videos, which have a kind of karaoke format. They're essay films that research themes that are very wide-ranging, but she does this in a way that is, rather than being didactic, she sets these kind of academic research and thinking to song, and they're accompanied by karaoke. And so, Ali, are you still here? Ali Wong, can you unmute yourself?
Prem.
Hi, I'm sorry it's so late in Hong Kong, but I was hoping, would you still join us for a little bit of karaoke?
Well, I thought that you were going to lead the whole thing.
I think that is my job. So as I was mentioning, the artist Wong Kit Yi, also known as Ali Wong, makes these essay films. And so I want to take a little moment for us to watch an excerpt from one of her films called A River in the Freezer. And I'd like us to unmute ourselves and see if we can sing along with it. Let me cue that up.
Digital. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Morning.
Oh, sorry. Let's start this again. Is the audio working?
Oh, the purple is.
Anna. Burn.
Is the audio working?
Cygnus Yoga. Yoga means glacier. Glacier means ice river in Chinese. How can we put the river in the freezer? Falling.
Over many years, hundreds of years,
hundreds of thousands of years produced glaciers. Glaciers can move.
Glaciers can flow like very slow rivers. It's our archives.
Information about conditions on Earth over hundreds of thousands of years. Samples of supplies.
Nice.
Pictures and just minerals and
Bubbles and
pollutants
for
that have
snow for
collected
millennia.
snow for millennia.
That's
That's life.
life.
Even
And
fossils.
fossils.
There's no hope. Anything can be revitalized.
Thank you, Prem. Sophia?
Okay, thanks for that. If anybody's interested, I can send you a link to the whole film somewhere, or Ali can. Ali, are you there?
Yes, here. Hi.
Okay. How was that to hear your to hear your work turned into a karaoke experience?
My world, I don't know, how much time do we have?
Like on the shorter end, I think I said 5 minutes. I think maybe 3-ish, if we can do it.
Wait, repeat your question again.
I just want to ask, how was it? Have you ever actually had a whole group of people virtually sing karaoke to your film before?
Not really. You were always the one saying that.
But what is it? I mean, for you, there's something in the participatory part of this. I mean, when I first encounter your work, it seems like you're always trying to bring people into the things you make in different ways. How did you come to this idea of making a karaoke essay film?
Yeah. Well, I guess we were briefly talking about walking and running. Like, for me, the running subtitle is just feel like home. You know, it's very, you know, I'm very secure when I see the subtitles, but also it's because, you know, I really enjoy running. So if I have time, I like, you know, running in the evening. So running somehow for me is like a form of like a moving meditation. So it's very intense. It's very like, you get very tired, but then somehow you're like mentally or like emotionally, you're very recharged. So I like the idea that, you know, I like the running subtitle in karaoke because like, I like the idea of running with time. So I don't know, I hope that, you know, the information that I research or I gather from the specialists, you know, sometimes are kind of dry. So I was hoping that if I use this more familiar format that, you know, people will be able to jump into the content with me better. Does it make sense to you?
I mean, it of course. I mean, I haven't heard a lot of essays that people sing with. So I think it definitely seems to work as a strategy. I mean, but for you in general, I mean, one thing I want to say, and we've known each other for a while, I mean, you don't actually sing a lot of karaoke. You like to watch karaoke. Why is that?
I enjoy, I don't know, I observe you guys, I think that's fun. And I like, you know, I like people enjoying the work, and I like people having certain kind of bonding experience that I create. You know, it's not necessarily I have to be a part of that after I make the work. Plus, like, you are a better singer. Like, you know, you don't need me to sing with you.
That's not true. Come on. Well, what's the name of the gentleman who wrote the music for that too?
Kyle Oppenheimer.
Yeah, Kyle.
Yeah.
And he's the real singer. But you know, it's pretty catchy. Well, thank you, Ali. Thanks for staying with us from Hong Kong, and thank you for your work. So I'm going to continue from here, and so, like Ali's video, like Kit Yi Wong's video, this exhibition juxtaposes things from different worlds. Exhibitions are spatial forums for connecting actors, objects, and ideas. They're an inherently collaborative medium. Every exhibition involves multiple voices and roles. And I want to give a shout out, I think Paul was in the audience, Barry Rosenberg, who directs the University of Connecticut's Contemporary Art Galleries, who this whole thing exists in a way because of him and his whole cadre of people and collaborators. This show exists because of many people. So today, though, exhibitions have become another accelerator for global consumption. As curator Maria Lind notes in her recent book, 7 Years, quote, they operate in roughly the same way as a smoothly crafted shopping mall, which wants to create a seemingly effortless experience so as to make you feel good. At the Teflon Biennial, very little or nothing stands out. Consequently, we lose the kind of friction that is one of art's greatest assets. It's a friction that forces you to see, feel, and think about things differently, however so slightly. Instead, visitors are flushed through a well-designed and aptly engineered biennial where there's just enough stimulation to avoid boredom and keep you prepared to consume more. This kind of Teflon biennial speeds up experience for the jet-setting cultural class. It's easily forgettable. In contrast, the exhibitions I most admire embrace complexity, polyvocality, and intersecting structures. Ooh, even an unfinished quality. As just one step in a longer process. That tries to transform the world while leaving traces on both historical and individual memory. And I'm going to clear the annotations for a moment, y'all. Okay, so I'm very honored to have here with us Doug Ashford, one of the members of Group Material, and Maria Lind, whom I just quoted before, who has really been a mentor and a guiding light in thinking about curating. I'd like to bring Maria and Doug on to talk.
Hi there.
Hi. Is Doug here?
Can you hear me now? You
All
can?
good.
Okay, good.
Now we can hear you.
Okay.
Great to see you here, Doug, and to see everybody else. And this session has really made me think about a lot of different things, revisiting old things, some new thoughts. And one of the things, Doug, with you and your work is that you continuously push me to think new things, discover new things out there. But today we will talk about something which has happened quite a long time ago.
Yeah,
a series of exhibitions that are often quoted both because of their subject matter and because of their format. So it's the AIDS timeline, which is actually a trilogy, but there were also some predecessors and some things that came after. So do you want to tell us briefly about what this actually was?
There's so many ways to sort of begin, so I don't want to take up too much time, but the timeline was a response to a crisis that we were all experiencing personally and individually. The collective and sort of polyvocal context of the group and the history of the group material allowed us, and the context of the art world allowed us to create and build a platform for the bumpiness that Prem talks about in the site of the exhibition as a possible forum for reviewing and reflecting on why the AIDS crisis happened and why that epidemic was, in a sense, now something that we can socially reflect on. I think it's kind of timely, at least for people of my generation, while we're experiencing the kind of asociality and the context of confinement and isolation. Many of my friends from those days are looking back at the way in which those places of sociality might be reinvented. And I really want to thank Prem. It's quite emotional for me, actually, Prem, to be able to be a participant here and to experience those inventions.
So, Doug, the first iteration was took place at the Berkeley Art Museum in 1989. Then the AIDS crisis had been going on for quite a while already. So what about this time in between? For how long had you worked on the project? And what can we take from it today, more concretely?
Yes, it's what I mean. I think the periods of time between were also, in a sense, something I'm asking of my students also as I enter into these online forums for pedagogical experimentation, is the context of sort of personal but also social digestion, in a sense, like with the formation of context of social and political response, things like ACT UP, the amazing work that Marlene and Graham Fury produced. There was an intensified situation in which we had to share and compare notes and to figure out ways in which the context of visual culture and design might create places in which people could form constituencies of resistance. I mean, I think this epidemic or pandemic is less socially produced, but for those of you who've looked and remember, the HIV epidemic of that period was one that was, in a sense, produced by governmental and medical institutions, their indifference to the constituencies that were affected by that virus. So the way in which art or culture could respond had to be something that was figured out collectively, not just between group material, but between all the contexts that we knew about, healthcare workers who were doing activist programs in and out of hospitals, the Gay Men's Health Crisis, the Gay Men's Health Center on 13th Street. There was probably meetings every night, and from those meetings came strategies of investment and came ideas of visual comparison and juxtaposition where the exhibition itself could be designed. To begin, we did borrow something from ourselves in a way, which was the timeline exhibition we'd done in 1984, which was part of another political context, which was American artists' investment in trying to form a context of solidarity with the American government's imperialist work in Central and South America called Artists' Call Against U.S. Intervention in Central America. So there's a broader history, probably going back to 1984, in trying to see the way that the form of the exhibition could somehow represent a horizon for rethinking our place in politics.
Doug, on the note of what Prem has been bringing up today, the how of things, the formal articulation, can you tell us something about the specific format of the timeline exhibition? How did you arrive at that, and how do you think about it today?
Well, I think in a way it was arrived at both through a kind of formal reflection of how pedagogical contexts work, because here in the States, most of the people, most of us who are in the group were educated within the classroom, and that the classroom was often decorated with this idea of a historical timeline to place you as a student in relationship to a teleological idea of the notion of American progress. And this notion that we are, as a democracy, progressing towards something that is always better than the present was clear to us already as an antediluvian and failed proposal. So in a way, the timeline is both a representation of the history of the virus and its relationship to us and citizens of the world, but it was also a critical context in which there could be reflection about how our own memories or our audience's memories would present themselves as a way to critique official history. Because for those who have looked or for those who remember, the experience of many people who were dealing with the epidemic directly was antithetical to the context of its social reproduction in media and museums.
A few years ago, you and I had a conversation about the culture wars in the 80s. And this was, of course, part of that. And it was to do with us talking about what we need to do now, but this harking back a couple of years at least. Can you maybe flesh that out a little bit more? If you compare the culture wars, the methods, but also the lessons, and what we can take to our time.
Well, I mean, in that sense, I have an individual response that is very different from, I think, what the collective contexts and collective thinking of group material would have been in that period. As you know, because we've been in conversation about this for a while, I've become increasingly invested in the idea of temporary and selective withdrawal from ideas of discourse. I'm modeling them after the context of abstraction and trying to figure out a bright way in which local and very sort of intimate relationships with other people can create models of subversion. In that sense, and this is private, but I'm spending way more time with my students than I am with museums, because I feel like the cultivation of that context is more immediate and more direct, particularly given the disastrous socioeconomic context of the United States today. I have more students in trouble. We have an epidemic of mental illness. We have contexts of disenfranchisement that were nothing like the 20 years of teaching that I had before the last 10 years. Trump, in a way, is just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Doug and Maria.
Thank you.
I think that is a note in terms of your role with your students, but also how we are all together these days. And I mean, I will say that one of the really odd things about this epidemic and crisis is that I have spent more time, at least online, with people whom I love, whom I so rarely see. So thank you, Doug. Thank you, Maria. And your work continues to inspire. So. Oh, no, I don't want to sign you in. Okay, there you go. Let's see. That's the letter P. In case any of you have never heard the letter P, that is a P.
Input. When I speak to myself, I often ask myself with K, was it hard to tell the story of the studio's evolution from the spatial perspective? Was it really as empty as I remembered it being? Probably not. There was a certain amount of predictability to the layout and order. There was a mutual understanding between the curators and the artists on each floor. There was also a great deal of imagination involved in how the space should evolve. A space this small could change quite radically in the space of a single exhibition. I think this fluidity is what makes a good exhibition space, because it allows for change and reappraisal.
Thank you, GPT-2, Model 345M. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention earlier, those dark space slides throughout the presentation are the voice of an AI trained by Konrad Renner and Christoph Knoth on a corpus of my past writings and talks. It's an attempt, however flawed, to extend beyond my limited self. Could an AI produce writing that is not only smoothly predictive, but also bumpy? How might an algorithm learn to break its own rules, a system, its own frameworks? So it's true that over this presentation, I've tried to construct an argument out of words, but it's also a bit slippery. Let me begin again. Dear reader, I am writing to reach you, even if each word I put down is one word further from where you are. This is not only coquettishness, nor mere insufficiency. It's part and parcel of my claim. Even as I grasp at my titular theme to hold it fast, it remains rough under my hands. It throbs, it beats, it pulses. It doesn't let me believe that I own it. Art making often represents poetry over persuasion, difference over didactics. And at this moment, I wanted to ask Jason Dodge if you could join us here. Jason is an artist based in Berlin, but who has been also doing very important work around poetry for the last several years. Jason, are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Great.
So, Jason, I wanted to ask you to read the poem by Noel. Maybe you can introduce the poem that we had spoken about and that I wanted to bring into this conversation.
Okay. I just started to think once everything started to be moving towards this situation where we were going to be asked to stay at home, that it felt quite urgent, this idea to ask poets to that maybe the poets who I'd been working with in the press and some other friends to send me what they're writing at this moment, with the idea that the act of writing, that there are some kind of healing vibrations in the act of writing poems, and that's something that to show that these thoughts are being thought and words are being put down on paper was something that I wanted to put out in the world for people to be able to experience in their own way. And so Noel Cocat, who is really absolutely brilliant poet, sent me this poem called God's Green Earth, which I'll read. My kinsfolk, I'm sorry for my pride. Are any of us exempt from a bumpy road? The memory of each moment, the greenness of phosphorescent cities, how they lick the wind. With large round eyes, I look at the world. Look at us all dreaming like that, and then a million chambers with all of us stuffed in. How do we ever foreclose on a menace? Look at a schoolhouse, the color of mud, see how it tricks itself of its students, and see what we call a rainbow that enwraps all of us in a gigantic circle. See that blade of grass sprouting up from a verb, the only one we have ever needed, and it's rightly called to love. So that's Noel's poem, God's Green Earth. And so I'm trying to put together about 14 poems. I thought it was like that suggested 2 weeks. I mean, it will also seem like part of the past, this idea of a 2-week quarantine. But I thought it was interesting to begin with 14 poems. And I guess today, the 10th one will go out. But I felt also part of this urgency came from this sense that most of the information that we're experiencing all the time feels very temporary, that the news or information from 3 days ago is replaced instantly with the news from today and then tomorrow. And we might lose track of this time, and one of the great ways of documenting it is by not documenting it specifically, but through the work that people are making within their reach. And so also asking artists to be working within the reach of what's in their homes, in their hands, around them. It's just,
well, I mean, in general, I think, oh, and I'll read you, Doug Ashford just asked in the chat if you can send the link to the poems. So maybe you can also, we can put some sort of way that people can access it or join the list. But I mean, I think that in general, in your practice, and full disclosure, I've known you for a long time. Jason was my teacher a couple decades ago. But the fact of you as an artist making part of your practice to be to invite other creators, poets to join in and to publish their works and to create that platform for them seems like such an incredibly meaningful and generous gesture. And you know, it's just, it resonates so strongly with me. I wonder if you can talk just a little bit about that as how you think about it as being part of your own individual practice.
Well, I don't, I guess at a certain point I felt like one person's work wasn't enough for me. I wanted to really be involved and engaged in other people's work the way, I mean, it's actually really great. I'm looking at the screen and I see Maria Lynn sitting next to you, Prem, on the screen, and thinking how Maria is the, at the time when I was your teacher, Maria was the first curator I ever met who I worked with on a project. And it's that simple invitation of somebody saying to you, here's a date and here's a place and here's a space, and you can do something there, that it's such a beautiful gesture. And I think that we can lose track of that as being such a beautiful gesture. And I wanted to, I had been interested in language in my work, but also knew that in the process of developing as an artist that I wanted language to leave my work. And so I wanted to find a way to get to know, and in a real way, the poets who I was reading. And I felt like the weakest thing that one can do is to ask somebody to relate to one's own work with a poem, and instead just wanted to create an entirely parallel context for poetry to exist as a way of pushing it out there in the world, like doing something more from the side of an editor, more curatorially than having to do with my own work. It's very important to me also that I have some of the books here. There's also a nice connection because Karel is also somebody who I met back in that time, but here's some of the books. Paul Elliman's scissor handles from his Fitz alphabet. There's a book from C.A. Konrad. So each one has the letter P like you had up on the screen before, but in Paul's alphabet.
Very important letter, the letter P.
Here's Noelle's book that we did a few years ago. We're going to make another book soon, Danica Kelly. And so I just wanted to make something that was not going to be so attached to me that everybody could pick up one of those books and read it on their own terms and develop their own relationships with poets, and also tried to get some of these English language poets to travel God's green earth, to visit different art institutions, because the common language of art is English. It's possible for English language poets to read within an art context anywhere in the world. And so at the moment I was meant to be in Hong Kong with Eileen Miles doing some readings, but in general there's been this great opportunity to get poets to read within context outside of an English speaking country, because often poetry festivals are in the language of the place, the local language, and so it's exciting to find a way for English language poets to be reading everywhere.
Well, now, I mean, it does seem like, you know, for better or for worse, we might have platforms to have you doing poetry everywhere. You just need to, you know, we've got 15 time zones here. So
yeah, well, you know, the amazing thing about the internet is that poetry, it's a great moment for poetry. There's so much incredible poetry being written now. There are huge archives online of the whole history of poetry in sound and in video, and you can, anything that I'm posting or publishing, you can find countless videos of these poets reading, which is ideal.
Well, we might ask you for some of those links so that, you know, afterwards or as a follow-up, we can share them with other people. But thank you so much, Jason. It's amazing to have you with us. And it's really the poems you've been sending every day over these last 10 days, 14 days, 12 days so far have been really sustaining. So thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Jason. Okay, so we're going to speed along. I'm going to click through a bunch of pages and move to some other things. So I want to talk about movement for a second. We are coming close to the close. Thanks for everyone for staying with us. Movement comes in many tempos, staggered, overlapping, intersecting, rife with potential synchronicity and conflict. The order of music is felt mathematically, embedded within counted time signatures. Rhythm itself contains narrative without further explication. Much of what I've shared with you today involves language. One irony is that, as a child, I had a very hard time listening to any music with lyrics. This is what I often listen to while writing these words. And I'm now going to play a piece by Dawn of Midi, which continues to sustain me. So I hope you'll stay with and listen to it for a moment. Oops.
Prem, the sound is not working. Perfect.
Okay, apparently we're having an audio problem. Well, thank you. Thanks, Julia. Okay, well, then instead what we'll do is we will, given our timing too, we'll share the link. Julia, could you share the link to Dawn of Midi? This is one of my favorite albums of all time. Let's just keep it real and say it's this kind of incredible 46-minute masterwork. It uses only 3 instruments, drums, upright bass, and piano to produce a polyrhythmic odyssey. Every note is precisely composed, yet within its tightly syncopated structure, the album's acoustic instrumentation and choreography breathes, allowing dissonance, tension, and resolution to emerge as you listen to it again and again and again. So, I used to claim that the only medium is time. I know that this talk has taken a while. It might feel a bit sprawling. But to be honest, I admire bucking the tendency to streamline, to strip down, to specialize, to eliminate redundancies. A system's flaws can be as significant as its successes if they're made transparent. This can mean trying to do too many things at once, just like this presentation is performing right now. So here, this is PDF. This is part of PDF, which David Reinford, somewhere out there in the ether, has just released today via ORG, his publishing company based in the interweb. Now, you might have just experienced this set of ideas and objects as a talk extended over time, but I also think of it as an exhibition extended over space. Polymorph Part 1 was originally planned as a show set to open at the University of Connecticut's Contemporary Art Galleries on March 30th, 2020. This talk would have premiered as both a performance and distributed publication at the opening. Despite the show's postponement, it's been a useful exercise in developing multiple formats in parallel. When a set of ideas are optimized for a single context, they can sit too comfortably within that frame. I'm more interested in things that are iterative and generative, to creative approaches that strive for precision, yet remain open-ended, shifting between media and modes as an ongoing form of prototyping. This particular presentation posits itself as polymorphic, moving between performance, screen, and space. It embraces the entanglement of ideas in the process of becoming material. It also sees itself as a toolkit for a series of possible exhibitions. What if every exhibition could exist in multiple places and forms at once? What if, instead of being limited by the principles of scarcity and singularity, exhibitions operated in a mode of expansivity, openness, and continuous play? Many of the materials from this exhibition are contained for your download in the folder above or can be found online. Others, like books or albums, are readily available for purchase. Some exist as unique objects, but might be substituted for other artworks that are closer at hand, even ones of your own making. Perhaps you'd like to produce your own exhibition, your own essay, your own performance, using these materials in some way. If so, I'd love to see it. I've been known to say, every event is the rehearsal for the next event. I'll extend this here. Every polymorph is a rehearsal for the next polymorph.
Input. When I speak to myself, I'm thinking of what's at stake when I make a call to action. Like many creative practitioners in my generation, I often begin a project with a crash course in the theory and practice of call to action, which gives way to a search for intuition and a deeper understanding for the medium itself. I later come back to these questions when considering the practice of creative writing and artistic production in the age of social media.
We're arriving at the finale of this presentation. A good talk or exhibition usually starts with the simple whys, but since I've managed to avoid such directness so far, I may as well address this in conclusion. Polymorph Part 1 is focused on bumpiness as an intervention into artistic pedagogy and practice. Within a world increasingly oriented towards smoothed out experiences, it argues for the political necessity of things that produce friction, objects and ideas that are created with care yet remain uncertain. It slows us down for a moment. Let's read a text together by literary critic Shoshana Feldman that frames the role of learning in a bumpy light. I find it useful proposition for what we're experiencing here together. Julia, could you unmute everyone? And we can start, if you like. Where are those annotations? I'm going to clear the annotations. I would venture to propose today, as the accidental and yet generally valid lesson I have learned from that class, that teaching in itself, teaching as such, takes place precisely only through a crisis. If teaching does not hit upon some sort of crisis, if it does not encounter either the vulnerability or the taught. Oh. Crisis is becoming more commonplace. I think it's fair to say we're in one today. But despite the failures currently unfolding of health systems, social systems, support systems, ecosystems, economic systems, there's still ways of building mutual care and community. It might start by inviting our strange bedfellows to rub elbows. Work Architecture Company's Public Farm 1 served as a temporary museum pavilion for summer dance parties, as well as a fully functioning, fully recyclable urban farm. A landmark effort in sustainable architecture, the project demonstrated that it's sometimes possible to party and pursue utopian goals at the same time. That scene seems unthinkable right now. But even if such structures, so many people together, seem impossibly remote right now, continuing to conceive and work on them pushes us up towards common goals. And so one of the things that Work Architecture Company has had for a while is a great Spotify list of songs that start with the word work. And so, Dan and Amal, are you here by any chance? If not, I'd ask you all to stand up and let's work it together. Just stop playing?
Yes.
Oh, that's annoying. Let's stop screen sharing. Did anybody hear any music?
No.
Oh, that was what an anticlimactic moment.
Right before.
Does anybody hear music now?
Yes, we hear it. Yes.
We hear it.
Yes.
Perfect.
Stop. We don't hear it. It's bumpy.
Very bumpy.
This is Missy Elliott, one-time exclusive. Come on, is it worth it? Let me work it. I put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. It's your primitive when yet. It's your primitive when yet. If you got a big, let me search it to find out how hard I gotta work. Yeah, it's your primitive when yet. It's your primitive when yet. Come on. I like to get to know ya so I can show ya. Put the pussy on ya like I told ya. Give me all your numbers so I can phone ya. Your girl act the same thing, call me over. Not on the bed, lay me on your sofa. Call before you come, I need to shave my choke cha. You do or you don't, or you will I won't cha. Go downtown and eat it like a vulture. See my hips and my tips so cha. See my ass and my lips don't cha. Lost a few pounds in my whips for ya. It's the kind of beat that go ba-ta-ta. Ba-ta-ta-ta, ta-ta-ta-ta. Sex me so good I say blah blah blah. Work it. I need a glass of water. Boy, yo, boy, it's good to know ya. Is it worth it? Let me work it. I put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. It's your primitive is when yet. It's your primitive is when yet. If you got a big, let me search it to find out how hard I gotta work. Yeah, it's your primitive is when yet. It's your primitive is when yet. Come on. If you're a fly gal, get your nails done. Get a pedicure, get your hair did. Boy, lift it up, let's make a toaster. Let's get drunk, it's gonna bring us closer. Don't I look like a Holly Berry poster? See the Belvedere playing tricks on ya. Girlfriend wanna be like me, never. You won't find a bitch that's even better. I make you hot as Las Vegas weather. Listen up close while I take it backwards. Okay, begins to y'all listen me what you want. I'm not a prostitute, but I can give you what you want. I love your braids and your mouth full of phones. Love the way my ass go boom, 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 boom. Keep your eyes on my boom, boom, boom. You think you can handle this? Don't. Take my thumb off and my ass go boom. Cut the lights on so you see what I can do. Is it worth it? Let me work it. I put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. It's your primitive is when yet. It's your primitive is when yet. If you got a big, let me search it to find out how hard I gotta work. Yeah, it's your primitive is when yet. It's your primitive is when yet. Boys all type of boys. Black, white, Puerto Rican, Chinese boys. Wine, thang, 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 thang. Rock, don't thang, 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 thang. Girls, girls, get that cash. If it's 9 to 5 or shaking your ass, ain't no shame, ladies, do your thing. Just make sure you ahead of the game. Just cause I got a lot of fame, super. Prince couldn't get me, change my name, Papa. Hooter can tell you slave again, no sign. Picture Black saying, oh yes, I'm massa. Picture Lil' Kim dating a pastor. Minute Man, Big Red can outlast ya. Who is the best? I don't have to ask ya. When I come out, you won't even matter. Why you act dumb like, duh? Say you act dumb like, duh. As the drummer boy go pum pum. Give you some of this cinnabon. Is it worth it? Let me work it. I put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. It's your primitive is why it's your primitive is why if you got a big, let me search it. To find out how hard I gotta work, yeah. It's your primitive is why it's your primitive is why come on, silver fellas. I like the way you work that. To the ladies, whoa, you sure know how to work that. Go.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining me here today. And thank you to everybody who's been part of this. Thank you to Julia Iglesias, who has been the assistant for this, Emily Smith here in Berlin, and to all the fantastic artists, curators, designers, and more who have been part of this, and for all of you for joining. Let's find new ways to be bumpy together. Thank you.
Thank you, Prem.
Thank you, Prem.
Thanks, Prem.
Amazing.
Many kisses.
Thank you. Thanks, Prem.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.